super excited, super excited to be here with you all today. So let me get my screen shared and we can start. Thank you for joining. We're gonna just get right into it. We're gonna talk about the intersections of community care, birth, and environmental justice. But before we start, I'm going to introduce myself, but as Adam asked, if folks can drop in their name, location, and whose are you? Like who are you accountable to? Who are your people? I really would like to know whose are you today. So I'm Janine. I have 3 identifiers that I usually use. I'm a dreamer, I'm a grower, and I'm a culture bearer. My full name is Janine Camilla Valerie. I'm the daughter of John Valerie and artist Maupin, chosen daughter of Marsha Cole out of Evanston, Illinois. I'm the granddaughter of Dolly Maupin and Leonard Maupin from Evanston and Mary Lee and Raymond Lee from Mobile, Alabama. I'm the great-granddaughter of Wally Jr. and Alabama midwife Willa Mae Valerie, and I'm hailing from the stolen traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe, or the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi nations. I'm here representing and accountable to the South Side of Chicago as the founder and lead steward of Chicago Southside Birth Center. And I'm a Black midwife, a mother, an herbalist, a wife, a sister, and most time a really good friend. My pronouns are she, her, and goddess, and this introduction is typically how I introduce myself because I really want people to know what's important to me. It's my ancestors, my community, my homeland, and my lineage. And introductions like this provide all of us ways to understand what's important in someone's personal life and key ingredients to community care and healing. So we'll get right into it. I'm gonna go through this pretty fast because these are the objectives. We're gonna talk a little bit about the foundational frameworks of reproductive justice, which also expands to birth justice, environmental justice, and community care, and where those movements intersect. We'll also talk about how environmental justice and climate change affects our reproductive health across the lifespan. We'll also we'll also learn how to expand our social justice movement work and community care through combining these 2 frameworks. And we'll get a few, not a lot, because it's only an hour, but we'll get a few examples of the liberatory tools we can use to incorporate our everyday EJ and RJ work. And then lastly, I have a herbal remedy to share with you all, and you can share with your chosen community and co-conspirators. And I just wanted to disclose, like, this lecture or interaction is specifically speaking about creating safety and care systems for BIPOC communities and the legacy of RJ and EJ from a Black feminist lens, just in case you were unaware. So I'll start. As I was assembling this PowerPoint, and I love doing PowerPoints, but I really wanted to make sure that I was touching on all of the information that I wanted to share. I did a 3-card pull, and so I was like, oh, wow, this reading was right on time, so I thought I would share it with you all. So the first card of the 3-card pull is the daisy, and it says, be yourself. And so this first card is, if anyone knows anything about herbs or plants, the daisies is in the family, like with a lot of powerful healing medicine. So it's in the family of elecampane, chamomile, echinacea, boneset. And so this card reminds me, in being myself, I have the tools and to heal and provide care in abundant ways in and with my community. And in the center of community is always love. So loving all of ourselves is the best medicine. So we'll just jump right in. What is birth justice? And before, we start talking about the framework of birth justice, I want to just talk about the evolution of where we are with birth justice. When we think about reproductive rights or the freedoms and legal rights regarding to reproduction, it got a lot of traction through the women's rights period, the women's rights movement, and much of the advocacy for reproductive rights included access to safe and legal abortions. And so then we move to the term of reproductive justice, and it moves us from only thinking about reproductive health or reproductive rights to thinking about rights in the context of the intersections with racial, social, political, and economic inequalities, right? So that affects a person's ability to not only access reproductive health care, but it also, brings into account how they're presented in the world as, maybe a person of color or maybe a person with a disability or things like that. And so we really moved from, we just deserve these health rights to we deserve rights and care that also include our intersections in our work. The reproductive justice framework, and that term actually was a term that was coined in Chicago by a group of RJ leaders, one of them being Sister Loretta Ross from Sister Song, and even our own Dr. Tony Bond, who coined this term reproductive justice. And it really looked at Black women coming together for this purpose. And that term was coined in 1994. So according to Loretta Ross, like I said, one of our RJ founders, reproductive justice is defined as the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent children we have in safe and sustainable communities. So birth justice is the evolution of this larger movement and framework, and many organizations are adopting to be more expansive in our visioning. So let's look at a couple of birth justice definitions. According to Black Women Birthing Justice, birth justice is defined as it exists when women and trans folks are empowered during pregnancy, labor, and childbirth and postpartum to make healthy decisions for themselves and their babies. Birth justice is part of a wider movement against reproductive oppression, and it aims to dismantle inequalities of race, class, gender, and sexuality that lead to negative birth experiences, especially for women of color, low-income women, survivors of violence, immigrant women, queer and trans folks, and women in the global South. I just want to give you one more definition because I really appreciate the expansiveness of this definition to also include birth justice includes the right to choose whether or not to carry a pregnancy, to choose when, where, and how, and with whom to birth. And that's really important, right? Including access to traditional and indigenous healers, such as midwives and other birth workers, and the right to breastfeeding support. And this lecture is really truncated. We could talk about all of these frameworks all day long for like weeks at a time, but I just wanted to give you a few examples of birth justice practices, right? And as we move through the story that I'm telling, I want to shout out some beautiful examples of programs and organizations and organizers that are embodying both birth justice practices and environmental justice practices. So when we think about birth justice practice, we're talking about local abortion funds like the Chicago Abortion Fund, or increasing access to birth workers of color to protect birth spaces through birth worker collectives and organizations like Chicago Volunteer Doulas, offering substantial scholarships for BIPOC midwifery students. Our organization did that. I don't know how substantive it is, but we try. Community focus and BIPOC-led birth centers providing full spectrum of reproductive health care, which includes abortions like choices in Memphis. Yes, Scotty?
I just got a ping to speak a little slower for our closed captionings. Just wanted to flag that. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. I do speak really fast. And then all of these are examples of birth justice frameworks that center systemic change for maternal health and stand in the gaps with community care. So we'll move to what is environmental justice. So like birth justice, EJ speaks directly to environmental racism that affects communities that have long histories of environmental injustices such as waste dumping, resource extraction, land appropriation. That's just to name a few. Communities of color have seen countless ways in which their environments, food systems, lands, and safety have been compromised in the name of consumerism, commercialism, and colonization. It's knowing that we witness communities of color also being disproportionately affected by climate change, natural disasters, pollution, toxins in our food and our home materials, our cosmetics, and limited green spaces. Again, just to name a few of the injustices. Also, like birth justice, EJ movement recognized cultural legacies and intergenerational knowledge in creating solutions for our communities. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that with the community care, but that is really important, like the intergenerational knowledge that we have to understand what our communities need is really, really parallel in both birth justice and environmental justice. The term environmental justice was coined by Dr. Robert Bullard, Paul Mahoy, and Robin Saha and Beverly Wright in the 1980s. And the term describes equitable distribution of environmental benefits and harms experienced as a result of rectifying systems of oppression. And in 1992, the EPA developed a definition and a department for environmental protection. And this is the definition that they created in 1992. In October of 1991, the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit was held in Washington, D.C. And it was there folks who identified as Native American or Indigenous, African American, Latin and Asian Pacific attended and adopted 17 principles of environmental justice, which is a beautiful and comprehensive platform to share with folks around the world. I will like to mention that in the creating of this, these principles, that health was already on the mind of folks who are doing environmental justice and climate change work. And these are two specific principles that speak to health and environmental justice. Screen. Environmental justice includes the rights of victims of environmental justice to receive full compensation and reparations for damages as well as quality care. And then number 13, EJ calls for the strict enforcement of principles of informed consent and a halt to the testing of the experimental, reproductive, and medical procedures and vaccinations on people of color. And again, there's countless folks who have been standing in the gaps of, environmental sustainability and climate change since the beginning of time. So these are a few examples. I would be remiss not to mention the community of Argyle Gardens here in Chicago was being exposed to contamination from nearby landfills and industrial sites. What is called the toxic donut. And our mother of environmental justice, Hazel M. Johnson, was noticing these healthcare issues in her community and started the People for Community Recovery, which is an amazing organization run by her daughter to this day. We are also looking at having access to safe water in historic water crises like Flint, Navajo Nation, and most recently in Mississippi. We can look at lead poisoning in childhood, and now Illinois has policies where children from 6 months to 6 years old have to get lead testing to attend daycares or schools, which can be a barrier, but also a way to intervene if there's any lead or lead poisoning in the house. I think about land sovereignty and land back movements or land defense like Starbuck, versus Dakota Pipeline, and then advocacy for safer working conditions like the Memphis sanitation strikers who were striking for fair wages and better working conditions in Memphis, Tennessee. This is the one of the strikes that Martin Luther King was involved with. And so the theme for this year's summit is new growth and old roots. And I really, really love this theme because it's a beautiful way to connect these two frameworks that we just reviewed. I like to always speak about birth work is a land work. It's a nature-based career. It's a nature-based process of caring for people. And so midwifery and birth work is an intuitive and land-based century-old practice where we live in systems that continue to harm the landscape of reproductive health for BIPOC folks across the U.S. Many communities are turning inward to center community and weaving the frameworks of both EJ and reproductive justice to invoke healing, resilience, and sustainability through community care. And so people are like, what is community care? Community care is literally anything that we do for the collective care of ourselves and each other. So, you know, that could be mutual aid, that could be growing food for your neighbors, that could be deciding to recycle, or, you know, resisting corporations and only sharing clothes or swapping clothes or buying at thrift stores. Before we move on, though, I wanted to share a poem that I wrote about community care, and it's called "What Are You Dreaming?" I am dreaming of collective dreamscape and rest and relationships, where dreams answer questions, prayers, petitions, and divinations, guide rituals and sacred community care. I dream where there is no light, no air, no fire, no smoke. Let the land rest and ignite. May it be the start of divine dreaming. May the visions, words, and murmured prayers, rituals, and legacy find its way to the stars. In hand or in backpack, may my dreams find a way home. And so this is number 2 of my 3-card pool. Oh, and I forgot to mention that these cards come from a beautiful herbarary by, I think her name is Mai To. It's just so gorgeous. It has a book that accompanies it, and it talks about all the plants in the book. But this is the Quaking aspen. It's one of the oldest single living organisms in the world. The roots connect underneath the ground, and they're kind of like mycelium. They'll move and find a new place to grow a new tree. And so they're all connected underground. And so it really spoke to me to share this because aspen groves are ancient and communal trees. It is a spirit of deeply rooted connections that we can collaborate across our social justice movements to create new ways of being and safety in our community. Can someone give me oh, I can see the time, never mind. I was like, I needed a time check. So I'm gonna move to this. This can be kind of like academic, can be boring sometimes, but I just really wanna I really wanna hit home like where environmental justice and reproductive justice intersect in life, in our work, and everything. So the first thing I want to talk about is heat. According to the CDC, exposure to heat can lead to health harms for pregnant folks, including hypertensive disorders and pregnancy complications. As little as 1 day of heat may increase the risk. So we think about places where folks don't have fans or cooling centers or things like that. Like 1 day waiting at the train platform or in the bus in the heat can cause significant outcomes for a pregnant person or the baby. Heat exposure in any trimester has been associated with adverse pregnancy outcomes, including preterm, stillbirth, low birth weight. In addition, heat exposure during the first trimester may increase the risk of certain birth defects. It also creates dehydration in pregnant folks, which can cause contractions, right? And that is something that is not typically happening during a pregnancy. And so it can really cause an alarm for someone and then electrolyte imbalances. I had a client that, you know, we're talking about like environmental heat, but also work condition heat, right? I had a client that worked at the stove. I can't remember where she was working, but she had to make food all day in a restaurant, and her employer didn't want to give her a break. So she's like working, it was snowing outside, but she has to have on a tank top because she's just so hot working in the stove. She would like go over to the freezer and stand there to cool off. So I ended up writing her a medical letter so that she can have access to a chair. She can have access to breaks and water. And I requested that she be moved to another part of the store where she didn't have to work in the heat. But like to have an appointment to get that letter, that's really a barrier for some people, and unnecessarily use of power that you know that doesn't matter. I'm sure someone else could have like cooked. This is just a little I don't know what to call it, PSA that we had last summer when it was really hot on our Instagram page that showed cooling centers, that showed how to stay cool, like eating ice, keeping your windows closed, drinking water, taking a cool bath, and then warning signs if someone was heat exposed or felt like they had any of these issues, that they should contact their provider. So we use social media a lot to like bring in the environmental justice component of our work. The next thing is air quality. I know folks, we were all wearing masks. I mean, I'm still wearing a mask, but we were wearing masks last summer when the New York wildfires were happening. And so it has me thinking a lot about how, even with heat, it can promote unhealthy levels of air pollutants, right? So breathing polluted air causes inflammation and epigenetic changes that can interfere with the placenta flow. Epigenetic just means like changes literally on the genes of a person, right? So you can have these micro changes in genes that show up, generations down because of this injustice. And if you have poor placenta flow, it can cause blood clots and blood clot formation. And so exposure to both heat and air pollution together can increase the risk of adverse outcomes, so like inflammation, preterm birth. And then it really, really makes me think of how hot and dry weather can also increase the risk of wildfires, and wildfire smoke pollutants are known to be associated with adverse birth outcomes. And then someone who has asthma can really, really have a hard time with the heat and poor air quality. Complications for folks with asthma include preterm birth, low birth weight, and death, honestly, with higher likelihood for these events for a pregnant person with asthma exposed to poor air quality than someone without asthma. Again, this is a little thing that we put on our Instagram page with a few tips on how to stay safe during those wildfires last summer. And so climate change has so many adverse outcomes for folks who are pregnant and parenting. Climate-related hazards include, we already talked about extreme heat, flooding, wildfires, and it's been linked to some of these problems like anemia, eclampsia, which is, seizures caused by sometimes blood pressure issues and disorders in pregnancy, which are very, very scary, low birth weight or even miscarriage. Pregnant folks have to rely on transportation. And so sometimes with extreme natural disasters, there is no transportation to get healthcare, which can be super stressful and, increases someone's anxiety and PTSD if they've had to live through a traumatic event like a hurricane or wildfire or things like that. Also, we know that there are many biological and behavioral changes that occur during pregnancy and postpartum that make people more prone to insect, food, and water-related illnesses. So I think about folks who are in hurricane situations and standing water, or like, especially in the South, like what kind of bugs are that bringing and how are people navigating with that? If people are not breastfeeding, what kind of water they're using to make their formula for their child, right? So these are some of the things where environmental justice and reproductive justice are connected. I want to share a quick video from one of my North Stars, Jenny Joseph, who is a British trained midwife that has a birth center and actually the first Black-led midwifery school in the United States. And so during Hurricane Irma, she put out this short YouTube video of what folks can do if they were pregnant and couldn't get healthcare services. So it's about 2 minutes, so we'll just watch that.
Hi, I'm Jenny Joseph. I'm a midwife in Orlando, Florida, and I've been delivering babies for 35 years. Today we're preparing for Hurricane Irma, so I thought I'd send out this quick video for those of you that may be pregnant and at term, close to your due date, or just really scared about what might happen if your baby decides to come during the storm. Get a pen and paper so you can take some notes in case you can't watch this video later. First thing to do is to make sure that you're in labor by drinking at least 16 ounces of fluid to see if that slows or stops the contractions. If that doesn't happen, you know that this birth is imminent and you are going to have your baby. Labor will continue. If possible, call 911 or get to the nearest hospital. If you can't get through, if there is no communication, then just prepare to have the baby where you are. Find the safest place, perhaps the bathroom or shower. Bring towels and blankets with you and create some privacy so that you can get this labor taken care of. When you get close to that sensation of pushing, you'll know that the baby's birth is imminent. You do not need to do anything except follow your body. You know what to do. you are completely equipped to be able to deliver your baby. Once the baby's out, bring the baby to your belly. Skin to skin is the safest place for your baby. Place a blanket over the top of both you and the baby. Keep the baby very close to you, head by the breast, and lay the baby across your belly. You'll soon start feeling contractions again, more cramping as the placenta is about to be delivered. Do not cut the cord. Leave the cord completely alone. After the placenta is delivered, wrap it, perhaps in a towel, and hold it close to your body with the baby.
Okay, I'm going to stop it because I'm anxious about time. I have about 15 more minutes and I want to take questions. But this is on YouTube. You can literally Google Jenny Joseph, Hurricane Irma. And then she also created a longer video. It's about 8 minutes during Hurricane Milton. So she's amazing if you don't know about her. So food, I'm gonna move through the rest of these a little bit faster because I want to make sure we get to the last part of this presentation. We know that rising temperatures and extreme weather events such as flood and droughts threaten food quality, production, transportation, availability, and safety. These impacts can make it harder for pregnant folks to get healthy food. And then food shortages may lead to poor nutrition, which can make pregnancy more difficult and cause delivery problems. Food-related illnesses like listeria or toxoplasmosis, we see it all the time, like the recalls, and that is definitely due to like transportation and these different climate changes or effects on our food systems. Some communities have limited access to fresh produce. And so we're already living in food deserts. And so if we have any kind of like disaster that limits the quality of our food, we're getting even poorer nutrition in our communities. And then when pregnant folks have nutritional deficits or limited food, it can cause miscarriage, stillbirth, and preterm birth. And this is just an example of an environmental justice organization working with community to provide food and medications after Hurricane Milton. And my dear sister Erica Hall is the executive director for Florida Food Policy Council in St. Petersburg, Florida. And so her and a team of just community members organized a response team to bring people food and medication after and aftermath of Milton. Safety is a really, really important way to think about environmental safety because community violence is an understudied aspect of the social context that may affect the risk of preterm birth and small for gestational age babies. The reviews, it's not enough study out to really talk about it, but we know that when people don't have access to green spaces in pregnancy, there is research that shows that it can cause depression. And when people don't have there's one study I found, I believe it was in Canada, that people who had more access to green spaces had an increased fertility. So it makes me really think about some of our communities where there are no safe spaces, there are no green spaces, and people are mostly in the house, what that does to our reproductive health. Oh, you cannot see it, but this was a picture of a collaborative workshop. It's called Birth Emergencies Workshop that our organization does along with Medics. Medics is a Black health collective, and I'm on the board, and we spread emergency first response, community care, and survival skills to access health justice and long-term wellness for all Black lives. And folks mostly maybe heard of Medics in the context of their gunshot wound response training, but we also do asthma workshops, seizure workshops, community safety planning. We have a whole list of workshops that we provide, but the safety around birth and birth emergencies is one that our birth center and UJMA collaborated and created that curriculum. And then noise is also mixed research that shows that loud environment noise can play a role in the hearing development of babies. There's also evidence that occupational noise exposure could increase the risk of preeclampsia. What I find to be super fascinating when I think about noise and how some of the study shows that it reduces fertility. I don't know why my pictures are not showing up, but I can send this along so people can see. This is actually a picture of a podcast called Bring Birds Back. And the episode that I really, if you don't take anything away from here, just listen to the noise report on that podcast. It talks about how loud noises, and like when we live in cities, looking at the flight patterns of birds, when birds have to fly over cities with a lot of lights and a lot of noise, it reduces their fertility. And so it really makes me think what it's doing to folks, their emotional health, their physical health when we're around loud noises. And then lastly, this is why I'm a sustainable midwife. I'm obsessed about medical waste. We talk about, 15% of, 85% of all medical waste is non-hazardous, but it is that 15% that gets into landfills that can contaminate our land, our water, our air, and a lot of our disposal of medical waste is not disposed of properly. I have had the privilege to work both in hospital and out of hospital and in hospital, like looking at how much waste is produced on like one episode of care or like one birth. Like you can open up a package and it has 29 instruments in it and I only need one. But then once that is done, you have to get rid of it or clean it all or use these toxic cleaning solutions. And it's like really trying to be conscious of how much waste that I personally use in my practice that will keep me and my clients safe. But it is a really big conversation, and it makes me think of how use around the pandemic, how there were so many people using gloves and masks, but not having any education about how to dispose them. And so you go to a parking lot at a grocery store if you needed to get food, and there'd be gloves all over the parking lot because people had done their shopping. Now they're getting back in their car and don't want to touch anything with their contaminated gloves. So it's a really conversation that we started for the community care people to protect themselves with masks, but we didn't talk about how to dispose of masks properly. Okay, and then lastly, this is just the number 17 tenet of the principles of environmental justice. I won't read it aloud, but what we reviewed is totally not exhaustive. There's so many other ways that EJ and RJ intersect and ways that we can move our work forward together. So this is the last card, integration. Y'all like how this 3 card came out? Like, of course, the last one is integration because we're talking about integrating reproductive justice, environmental justice together. Mullein is like one of my best friends and plant ancestors. It's such a healing herb, and fortunately, it grows like wild in the parking lot of our birth center. And so it's all symbolic to me. I'm like over here geeking out, and I hope other people are not just staring at me. But I want to read just directly what it says about mullein in the book that I pulled this from. It says, mullein is like a spider sitting on her web, feeling the vibrations along various threads and seeing from the center how it all connects. And then it says connect disparate things. And I don't think environmental justice and birth justice are disparate. I think they naturally go together. And so we'll just talk now about how some of the ways that we can do that. So stay with me because I'm going to just get a little bit tangential, because liberatory tools, or the framework that I have been thinking a lot about in terms of using liberatory tools, are directly specific to birth justice. And so you'll see a definition that I created, but it's not, you can use this framework across any social justice movement. You can use it on like creating food systems, or you can use it on, dismantling the prison industrial complex. Like liberatory tools are the same, and you can just use them in your different sphere, because you'll see later on through these definitions what they actually are. And so when you just look up the definition of what liberatory and tool mean, these are the definitions. Liberatory is just really tending or serving in a way to liberate. And a tool is a device that aids in accomplishing a task. For some of us, We have instruments that we use in our vocation or profession as tools. I might use like a stethoscope or a Doppler to listen to the baby's heart tones, or a blood pressure cuff, or when I'm in my garden, I'll use a hoe or a spade, or something. Like, we all use tools in our work. But specifically around the work of liberation, those tools might look a little bit different. And so this is the definition that I said that I'm mused about, but it's specific to BIPOC birthing spaces in the work that we do at the birth center. And so this definition is an active participatory tool, used to resist the continued oppression of Black people and their descendants, and to elevate healing from racialized trauma that directly moves one towards liberation and self-determination. Specific to birth, liberatory tools for birth work offer protection to birthing spaces that, when not utilized, will continue to perpetuate racialized obstetric violence for Black pregnant people and their families. And so when I read this, I literally see how, the words could be changed, the setting could be changed, but it's really when the justice between reproduction and the environment, we're all looking for liberation, right? So if you use this, just quote me, quote a Black woman today. Again, the framework or the liberatory tools are liberatory and racially focused framework, right? And so some of the parts of liberatory tools, so if you think about the liberatory tools as the dinner plate, but each of these frameworks in ourselves are part of the meal, right? So it is a focus on BIPOC liberation and healing. It's guided by the principles of reproductive justice, environmental justice, and community care. There's harm reduction in our work. There's trauma-informed processes in our work. It's anti-racist. And I often say it's anti-Black, because that's really important in seeking liberation. It's culturally relevant, right? We're leaning on our culture and our ancestors and the ways that we relate to one another, and the ways and solutions that we have in our movements that is really specific to us carrying our cultures forward. And it's spirit-led, right? We're led by our ancestors, our kinfolk, how we move with each other, and our power in the movement. We do have power in our respective movements. And the guiding principle for liberatory tools is community care. So these are just a few examples. These are 8 examples. Like I said, I could talk to y'all about this all day long, but I really want to make sure we have time for questions. So expanding your sphere of focus. When you're thinking about your work, how can you expand your work to include some of these other intersections of injustices that we're working on? Just an example, we are going to have some of our pregnancy or childbirth education classes in a garden, so that people can learn some of the medicines that would help with some normal pregnancy like complaints, like, I'm tired, or I can't think of some right now, but just expanding our sphere of focus, right? Thinking about how we can build out. We're in the pre-construction process for our birth center. So thinking about ways we can build out a building that is more sustainable, that is more environmentally friendly, that uses less waste. So those are like different ways that we're looking at our sphere and expanding it. And then, folks can do the same thing. People are thinking about ways that, environmental justice or environmental injustice really is moved through the prison industrial complex, or collaborations between organizations. And so I really think that we don't have to do it all, but having relationships, and that's the next one, a filling tone of collaboration, having relationships across movements so that you can collectively move the needle in all of our liberations. Policy change is super, super important, that community partners are moving together to advance your movement. So another example could be, like the lead poisoning, that had a benefit for not only the environment, and the humans in these communities, but also children. So getting policy work moved across these three different interests really benefits everyone in the long run. Creating your own local food systems, that could be with like your chosen family or at your institution, or I think about this specifically to birth because it's not like a universal we, but like sometimes and we do this in community, right? Your cousin has a baby, you bring them some food, you go braid their hair, you clean up a little bit. That's mutual care, right? And that there's actual ways and applications that we can use to create meal trains or to create food systems, like providing resources for people who cannot leave the house or have just had children or things like that, or who are sick, right, or unable to access food. There's different ways that we can create our own food systems. Studying plants, knowing your plant ancestors, it's your birthright to be in right relationship with things growing around you. And then when I first started learning herbalism, I wasn't aware that many of the things I was consuming was right in my neighborhood. I mean, of course, you have to be careful of where you're sourcing stuff because of land contamination and things like that. But when we move our relationships to our natural world, that goes from like consumerism or like buying to utilize, or more transactional, that's the word I'm using for transactional. We're like, yeah, you're walking and there's an empty parking lot full of red clover on your block. You don't necessarily have to ingest that or even use that, but like the visual aspect and being in relationship with that is also healing in ourselves. And so helping people understand that. Creating a community care system. I want folks to walk away with the curiosity of how we can show up in community for others. Like, what can we offer? What is our skills for sharing? How can we create systems of care that aren't relying on corporations or exploitation and consumerism? I think about specifically right now with everything that's going on. Well, how can I show up for my community like that wants to learn how to start seeds or having seed swap, or I have folks who are like, Janine, I don't need to learn how to can. Like, how are we showing up for each other to step in the gaps of what systems are not providing for us along, whether that's reproductive justice, environmental justice, or both. And then lastly, having a feeling of gratitude and joy is so important. It's a daily practice that I try to have. And it's really one that will sustain us for the long term in our combined movement. In both of these practices, we know that we will get free. And I just want to quote the great Audre Lorde, who said, once we recognize what it is we are feeling, once we recognize we can feel deeply, love deeply, can feel joy, then we will demand that all parts of our lives produce that kind of joy. Yeah, and so that was just a few ways that we can incorporate EJ and RJ together. But what's my time? Oh, okay, I have time. Perfect. I wanted to leave you all with a herbal remedy. It's one of me and my family's favorite. Community care is intergenerational work. So please, as you watch this video, I'm introducing you to my two oldest children. This was about 5 years ago. They look nothing like this anymore. But it's really one of our favorite recipes. They make it all the time by themselves. They use it all the time. I'll make some and I'll come back home and it won't be any left. It's a lavender syrup and we put it in our tea, we put it in our coffee, we put it in our hot chocolate. Lavender is an amazing plant ancestor, and it's a nervine, and so it really calms down our anxiety, our nervous system. It's stressful to do system change work, and all of our movements require us to take care of ourselves and each other. That's what community care is. And so I immediately think of lavender when I think of community care. It is a herb that can hold our hearts. And as we move collectively in our social justice movements, I offer this to you all, and please share it. It's a quick little video. I'm so sorry. Can you see it, Kari?
I can see it.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
At this time, we can take some questions. So if people want to add anything in the chat or just unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you that I'm gonna try to put up with my email address.
I do have a question, maybe it'll inspire folks. I have some friends that are kind of just starting this journey of like, becoming a doula and birthright workers. Do you have any advice for folks that are maybe just kind of starting and trying to kind of build community and maybe seeking some guidance in the space here in Chicago?
Yeah, I do. People can, like, are they interested in training or just meeting people?
I would say probably both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Chicago Volunteer Doulas, I spoke about them earlier. Their birth justice organization led by an amazing birth worker, Lakeisha Harris. I actually met Lakeisha when I first moved back to Chicago. And they do doula training. They also really have a beautiful and robust training that speaks directly to community care, right? So these are doulas who are going to be providing support to their community. I've done several doula trainings before I was a midwife, and some of them are very, I would say, like white rice. And then I've gone to some like, okay, this is like red beans and rice with some cornbread and some greens on the side and some sweet potato. Like they're different in the training. So I love CVD. I love the work they do, and they have a beautiful network of doulas. They have a nice like right ceremony when they graduate. It's just beautiful in the way that they hold each other in their learning and then their birth, and they're able to speak to someone about their experiences they're seeing as they're attending birth. So that would be a first step. There's a lot of birth worker groups on, I'm not on Facebook anymore. You see, I don't really post on Instagram, but there are a lot of birth justice or reproductive justice birth worker groups on Facebook, on Instagram. Chicago Birthworks, Chicago Birthworks Collective is another one. They're based out of Hyde Park. So those are a few different ways. There are some birth worker groups in Pilsen. I can't, for some reason, I can't remember the names of the doula who is doing birth work over in that area. But it's so many doulas in Chicago, honestly. If you plug into one, you're gonna just meet so many other people.
Hi, this is Dale Kane. I have a comment. I decided to select this particular discussion, just a general interest in midwives, but I live in Chicago, and I was just impressed about how you connected all of the dots in reference to possible um, common things like could impact a one's pregnancy. I live in Auburn Gresham, and it is one of the highest infant mortality rate, and it's one of um, what they call special service areas that need extra resources because of the social economic conditions that in the community. But I just want to applaud you for the work that you're doing, and I just want to make sure that I get a copy of the recording because I serve on one initiative here in Auburn Gresham. It's called Courage to Love. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not.
Courage to Love. Yeah, several years ago, they launched an initiative just having those discussions with mom and communities about the infant mortality rate that's here in Auburn Gresham. And to it's one of the highest, as well as Austin and Inglewood, and we all have certain things in common, the social economic landscape. And so, but I never heard what you did, connecting everything together.
Mm.
And then I have a special interest in herbs. And I'm going to try to do more with it in my cooking program. Several years ago, I did Spice It Up, and we use certain spices and educate them about it, and how to incorporate that in their food with the fresh. And we had them start with little starter kits. And it's one of my best received classes that I did. And I think I'm gonna I'm gonna start that up again. But how can I get connected with your organization? What's the best way just to learn more about what you
Yeah.
do and so that we can share it in our community?
First of all, thank you for that. And that workshop sounds amazing. I'm like, I'm gonna reach out to you because I love doing community-based plant walks because folks,
Mm,
you have to
mhm,
go to, like a forest preserve or somewhere more diverse, but you can literally do a plant walk in your neighborhood and see, 25 plants just on one block. So
mm.
that ties in with the workshop you're doing with the spice and stuff. So I will be reaching out. But I was trying to show the last slide with my email address and our website. I'll drop it in the chat right now, but the slide wasn't coming up for some reason.
I remember one class I did, it was the outdoors in a community garden, and it was a multicultural, um, primarily Blacks and Hispanics. And there were a group that went around foraging, I believe that's what they call. And she pulled me aside, says, Dale, most American thinks of these being weeds, but they're not. These are healing vegetation, and they use it in their foods and make teas. And I should have grabbed onto that to really maybe do something and explore about the different types of vegetation that we see. And one of the things I learned about dandelions that run rapid, in our
Mhm.
backyard, and for
Mhm.
years pulling them and get rid of them. But in my learning about in nutrition, dandelion is one of the most nutrient dense leafy green vegetables. But the
Mhm.
only thing is that the ground in which it is grown out of, I'm trying to find some dandelion greens, like in the backyard, it's Chicago soil is toxic. In fact, when
Mhm.
I was doing school programs, they didn't want the kids to even touch the soil. We had to make raised beds for them because it's toxic.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, there's so many ways to remediate the soil too.
mhm.
So, I mean, this is a whole nother
Oh,
topic.
yeah, I'm sorry.
But yeah, I'm always like, there's no such thing as weeds. Like
Yeah, I'm
all
learning.
of this is somebody's family, right?
Mhm,
I
mhm.
remember my partner and his dad, they like mowed the lawn and mowed down a whole bunch of stuff. And they were like all proud of themselves. And I was like weeping. I'm like, why did you do that? But yeah, no, everything has a purpose, whether or not we think of it, like everything has a
Mm,
reason, right? And
mhm.
then one of my comrades is on here who studies a lot about soil. Is like really like these are the reasons why you'll see certain plants grow up because that plant has a nutrient that the soil needs. And so like we're pulling them out and there's ways we can heal that soil so that we can ingest those plants around us. I'm not, thank you so much. I'll definitely be reaching out. I'm not doing so well with the chat. Am I missing any questions?
Um, we have about 4 minutes. I did for folks flag, I just sent out a poll, but there was one question, and maybe we can wrap up with this one. So someone asked on the flip side, how do you go about finding a midwife or a doula?
Oh, that's a
Hmm.
great
Hmm.
question. I think it depends on where you want to have birth, right? So midwives, we work across settings, like in a hospital, birth center, or home. So I think that is the first part, like really deciding where you want to be. You can also email us at info@Chicago Southside Birth Center, and then we have a list of midwives and doulas too that you can reach out that we can share with you.
I think there was also maybe another question earlier around any resources for folks that might be giving birth soon or might need additional care. Would that be similar to what you just shared?
Yeah, you can,
Okay.
yeah, you can email us, Chicago Southside, what am I saying? Not us. Chicago Volunteer Doulas provides postpartum doulas as well. One beautiful thing about Chicago South, oh, I keep saying Chicago Southside versus the Chicago Volunteer Doulas is that it is sliding scale. So, you know, people having a doula is a right. It's not based on whether or not you can afford one. So Chicago Volunteer Doulas provides postpartum doulas as well. And then, you know, folks can reach out to us too, and we can help navigate some of that.
Perfect. And then I think one more question around what are conversations happening or ideas circulating in the RJ space that maybe aren't mainstream that we should be talking about more?
I think this connection to the environmental justice is not talked
Mhm.
about a lot. I'm in RJ, EJ, like Google communication things.
Mhm.
I don't know what that's called. Is it an email?
Maybe. We'll go with an email group.
Yeah, so like
Mm,
it's not even that many of us, it's like
yeah.
12 of us, but I think, you know, even some of my birth worker friends, if I ask them about ways that they incorporate RJ into their work, it might be a difficult stretch to kind of think about it. So I really love like being able to share with people, like this is a way that our movements intersect. And if you're a birth worker, you're already an EJ worker too, because like I spoke about, like birth work is land work. And so I think that's one thing I would love to see people like even muse about, even if you don't change your practice or your work in any way, just thinking about like how does this affect you know, the larger community of movement.
Okay, amazing. I just got a another one around there's an individual who's actually seeking advice. They're thinking about becoming a midwife of Chicago, and so they're currently deciding between schools. So just any general advice around that as they start that journey.
I'm laughing because I'm saying the cheapest one. No, I'm joking.
The cheapest one.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking. You can email me too. I love
Mhm.
talking about that. I
Okay.
went to Frontier Nursing University because they had a focus on keeping midwives in their community.
Mhm.
And so a lot of my birth work has been out of hospital and continues to be out of hospital. And so I knew that was the kind of environment that I wanted to train in. I used to work at the birth center at PCC, and I had all of my children out of hospital, 2 of them at home and 1 in the birth center. So I knew that's the kind of work I wanted to do. So I think it's also, you know, if someone is deciding where they want to have a baby, is also what kind of work that you want to do. And then that can help navigate um, which route you take. You know, that I'm a nurse midwife, but in Illinois, you could be a nurse midwife or a professional midwife. So a midwife that is not a nurse and who is specifically trained to work at a hospital, that's an option too. And so, yeah, just email. We can go to tea and have a long conversation about
Amazing.
options.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Um, and then I know folks are getting into lunch, but maybe we can just end with this one question around the waste that happens. And so someone asked as a hospital birth worker, how can we reduce medical waste? Or if you have any ideas on that.
Oh, I'm looking at your message now, and it is so, so, so awful. So some of the things that I try to do is like, it's hard. It's like a system, right? You
Mhm.
do what you can and then like tell other folks. So I try to, you know, as safely, some things are required to be opened up, you know, prior to a birth, just in case of an emergency. But there's some things that are not required to be opened up. So specifically, some of the things that I've refused to use is like that slip and slide that they put underneath someone to catch all the blood. I won't use that. I'll use a towel because a towel can be washed and you're never, unless it's an emergency, you don't make a mess like that. But that's also some of the art of having out of hospital birth. You don't have those technologies that you do in the hospital. So you learn to not use them. And so some of the instrumentations that are prepackaged, and you will have to open that up and use that. But as as much as I can use what's already in the room, I'll use that and versus opening up something else. I don't know it's not that many examples that you can have because like I said, it's so, everything's so individualized, package wise and things like that. But if I don't absolutely need it, I won't use it.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I think, that's part of the even raising that awareness, because I know the person who asked that question didn't realize how much we do waste in that. So, well, thank you all so much for joining us. And staying on. Definitely join the next two sessions at 2 p.m. and hope to see many of your faces tomorrow in person at the South Shore Cultural Center. Thank you all again. And yeah, if you have any additional questions, make sure, I know Janine shared her contact information, so don't hesitate to reach out.